This chat weekly. Always excited to have with us in the studio. That is Ken Gichinga, the CEO of Mentoria, as well as Wohoro Ndohho, who is the former Director General in charge of debt at the National Treasury. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and great to see you on the show.
Thank you very much, Abi.
Excellent. Let's discuss one of the top topics of discussion in the country as of this week. It is the fact that Kenya's debt repayments have crossed the 1 trillion shilling mark. We do know that the National Treasury has been indicating that our debt is within the limits. And of course, we are now looking at a debt of about 7.28 trillion shillings for the country. Let me start off with Mr. Wohoro. Of course, having worked inside the trappings of Treasury, perhaps should we be worried as Kenyans when we look at such high repayments as a country?
Well, we are past the threshold that is set by the IMF of 70% of GDP is the point at which there is cause for concern. And now that we are reaching that milestone, then there could be some reason for concern, yes.
And I can see you chose your words quite well, of course. Let me also pick Mr. Gichinga. What is at stake as we look at a debt repayment of about 1 trillion shillings? At the same time, we're standing at a budget of 3 trillion. That clearly means that out of our national budget as a country, 1 trillion will be wiped off and be channeled towards debt repayment. Are we biting more than we can chew?
Abi, that level of debt service is quite significant when a third of your national budget is going towards servicing debt. It becomes a source of concern, and it tells us that the country urgently needs an economic solution. Now, what is that solution? A lot of people have been talking about the expenditure side. You hear people saying we need to live within our means, we need to tighten our budget. But when you really think about it, we have to think of this 3 trillion within a context. 3 trillion for a population of 47 million people gives you a per capita rate of about 63,000 shillings per person. Now ask yourself, Abi, how much can you do with 63,000 shillings in 1 year? You know, even if you are being paid a minimum wage of 11,000 shillings, it tells you that that amount would only take you for 5 months. So it tells you actually our budget is not bloated by anything, but if anything else, our Kenya's public sector is highly underfunded, and we need to go to the revenue side. What this country needs is more revenue. And for me, I've always argued that that revenue has to come from the land value tax. That is the most legitimate tax. If you look at the writings of Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Henry George Stiglitz, it's been established that land value tax is the most legitimate form of tax to fund the public sector. So it's very, very important that, yes, I saw the land rates were increased this past week. There are plans to increase them, but they're increasing them to 0.1%. That's a meager, small portion. If you look at capitals around the world, land value tax is around 3%. And that's the direction we need to go as a country. So for me, I think the big idea has to be really talking revenue, because if we talk of cutting further expenditure, austerity measures, we're going to go the Greek direction. And austerity measures only contribute to further poverty and create deflationary measures within the economy.
Quite interesting. And Mr. Wohoro, I could see you smiling as Ken went on. Perhaps you'd like to chip in before we take a quick listen in on what the man manning the Treasury has to say about our debt levels.
Look, the notion that you cut expenditure, I mean, to disagree with my good friend Gichinga, you cut expenditure in efficient with the use of expenditure. And I think there's a debate around how we are actually spending our expenditure. There's the issue also of efficiency. How are we using the money so that it gives us the best bang for our buck? There's the issue of leakages. We are not using our money anywhere close to how efficient we could use it. So it still has to be a mix. It's not just revenue, it's also expenditure. I think one of the things we will see is that there will be an expenditure consequence of it. And that is, by and large, there will be a look at what you call fiscal consolidation. We have to cut back our expenditure. Now, on the revenue, the issue of just adding more taxes, one is that politically very untenable because, as you can imagine, the income distribution of our country is so skewed to the wealthy, and they'll fight this tooth and nail. It's next to impossible to enforce that without a more, what would call more in-depth look at how expenditure is actually going to be spent. There's no use raising more money if there are all these leakages in our budgets. And so the debate is good that it's happening now. Yes, you may look at revenue, but you must also look at the way we are spending our money. And I think there's a lot of space in that to consolidate and make it more efficient. A public service, for example, does really need to be looked at. The fact that we have a much more stronger push at fighting corruption is absolutely a critical conversation. And I'm glad to see that some very powerful moves are being made towards cutting that leakage.
Speaking about the leakage, the Treasury CS was with us earlier this week, and he touched on our debt levels as a country, maintaining that Kenya is shifting its debt approach. I'd like us, gentlemen, to listen to this clip so that we can be able to take a few more questions. Much concern around the growing appetite for debt by the government. Is our debt sustainable?
Our debt is highly sustainable. Kenya has never defaulted on any of its obligation, and we only borrow for capital projects. We only, in certain situations, we borrow to finance our budget. And for the last 1.5 years, I can confidently say for the period I've been around, we've never borrowed commercially. When we borrowed under the circumstance, is because of the severe impact of COVID, and we only borrowed concessionally from the concessional window, from World Bank, where the interest rate is about 1%. We also borrow from IMF with an interest rate of 0%, and all in the future, over 30 years. And this is not going to pose serious constraint on our repayment plan. Unlike before, we have completely discouraged commercial borrowing because of the short maturities and high interest rates are going to constrain our fiscal framework over a period of time. And we are now towards the tail end on working out refinancing some of those projects which are either not moving or have been borrowed from commercial window. We want to rationalize this and put ourselves on a standing that's going to put us on the right trajectory on debt management. We have a vibrant debt management office. We have equipped them. We have given them the necessary support. We have a debt policy which has been approved by Cabinet, and we are actually operating within the confines and the framework of the debt policy management that we are currently implementing. I am confident about that. Our debt is highly sustainable.
Thank you. Thank you, CS Ambassador Kuriat. Well, of course, that was earlier, not today, as you can see how I'm dressed at this moment. But, gentlemen, the Treasury maintains that the debt policy is in place, Cabinet has approved it, and we are seeing our debt to GDP ratio is now at 65%. And Mr. Wohoro, are we literally not listening to what the wider voices are saying? We did hear from the Institute of Economic Affairs indicating that Kenya is risking debt distress. Where are we in this?
Several things. One of the things that I think must take away from that, yes, we have had a very high level of debt. And there are several particular things that he said that are really good. One of them is that we've gone concession, no more commercial borrowing. That is excellent. Second thing he said is that we've got a debt strategy and a policy which has been signed off by Cabinet. In other words, it's next to impossible to overrule it. Thirdly, he said that he's going to refinance commercial debt. So there's a sense in which this train has been in motion, the brakes have been applied, and certain measures are being made that are going to improve it. The thing that has tipped us over the edge, I think, is the fact that with COVID-19, our tax revenues have pretty much collapsed, and now they're being built back. And so there's that sense in which before we completely turn over to a more sustainable strategy, we still have this mountain of debt for accumulated debt. One of the things I wanted to hear is, are we doing something about that mountain of debt? And clearly there's a strategy and a policy in place, which I think in any economic environment, in any economic school, are the right moves to make. The critical issue going forward is, what do we do with how much of that commercial debt we can refinance? The quantum of debt is too high. Yes, you're going to the commercial one. But I'm concerned that going forward, I think what we need to hear is, are we not going to take more debt? Or if you're going to take more debt, it must be at an exchange of the commercial one for more concessional debt. But it is too high. It is. I think we can't get past that.
Okay. And gentlemen, I'd like us to move quickly to our next item. That is, of course, the global plane manufacturer Boeing has been literally in the headlines for a better part of this week. And this has touched on the airline having an incident with its 777 plane, where we did see they had an engine challenge. As we can clearly see, a lot has happened over time, and this continues to have a big dent on the aviation, the plane manufacturer. To wrap up, just some quick comments, Mr. Gichinga. What does this mean for Boeing, seeing a number of countries grounding their aircrafts?
Obviously, it's a very difficult time for the company, not least because of the events that have been happening over the last 2 years. Now, we have to recognize that the engines of the Boeing 777 are actually made by a third-party company. That's Pratt & Whitney. So it's almost sort of a separated problem where they have to deal with a supplier who's supplying them engines and find out what could be happening. Now, for me, what I find very curious is Boeing and Pratt & Whitney have been in this trade for very many decades, and they've really fine-tuned the process of being able to manufacture airplanes. So it's, for me, I find it very unusual that over the last 1-2 years, all these intrigues are coming out. And you have to remember the aerospace industry contributes about $180 billion to the American economy. So sometimes one has to think, is there something else that's happening that we are not getting the full picture of?
Thank you, Ken. Our time is far much spent, quite a lot to catch up on, and we appreciate your insights, Mr. Ken Gichinga, as well as Mr. Wohoro Ndohho. That's why we leave it at on the Biz Chat. For now, we take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more.